I am absolutely flabbergasted by how many people have watched the trial this week with Harvey Weinstein and even the continued trial with Diddy, and yet I think they're watching some other case because they keep talking about how they made incredible strides and incredible advances. I'm thinking, in terms of what? So let's talk about the two most absurd, broken, embarrassing legal spectacles we've seen in years. The Harvey Weinstein trial and the absolute carnival case of Diddy. Now, these are two disasters, not just in terms of outcome, but in what they revealed about how the justice system has drifted into unreality. These weren't and aren't prosecutions. These are productions, and bad ones at that. Let's start with Weinstein. This week, the LA conviction, one of the very few pieces of that puzzle holding together, was vacated and gone proof, and a mistrial was declared, and the case unraveled predictably after an appeals court earlier gutted his New York conviction, citing, among other reasons, inter alia, prosecutorial misconduct and evidentiary sloppiness that would survive a first-year law school 1L mock trial. I mean, that let alone, a real court. And you don't need to be, learned at hand to understand that if you promise the jury one thing and deliver a mess of emotion and salacious nonsense, and they're going to take it out on you. This was hearsay and contradictory witness behavior, and you've got basically a reversal waiting to happen. So here's the real kicker. The Weinstein saga had really been positioned as the opening shot of the Me Too era. This was a cultural reckoning, as they say, and they told us, a moral reckoning. Fine, but don't rewrite due process to fit the vibe or the mood of the moment. You don't let political energy or emotional righteousness override the burden of proof and due process. And that's exactly what happened here. And that's what's still happening. The case was weaponized, not as justice, but as messaging. And the people running the prosecution forgot the difference. Now, fast forward to the Diddy case, or rather what started as a case and is now a deranged parade of sidebars and leaks and civil settlements and sensationalism and sex and freak-offs and baby oil. And so thick, so you need, waiters, hip waiters to follow the story. So let me say this flat out. Whatever crimes this man may or not have committed, they are now buried beneath so many layers of absurd commentary and media detritus that it's virtually, I think, impossible for the public to remember or focus on what actually the charges were or are. Now, we've got stories that are incredible. We've got stories about Poultry and gender politics and NDAs and pop culture and, some of the strangest things, posturing, all of this from media outlets that couldn't define a felony if it hit them on the head. Now ask yourself this: does any of this circus resemble the sober pursuit of what justice is supposed to be? At least what we thought. Does any of this look like a system interested in clarity or fairness or truth? No, because that's not the point. See, the Diddy saga isn't about the law anymore. It's about spectacle. It's been hijacked, just like Weinstein's was. And here's the problem. Here's the pattern. The public is conditioned to treat these as morality plays, not trials, not legal disputes, but spectacles to judge the soul of a man through gossip, not facts. And when the public gets bored or confused, what happens? When the public stops trending, or the story stops trending, I should say, or the charges don't match the headlines, they lose interest and justice evaporates. So what we're left with in both cases is the illusion of some kind of, reckoning, some type of denouement. Prosecutors, play for headlines. Defendants are convicted in the court of social media long before voir dire even begins. And when those cases collapse, what's the explanation? Technicality, juror error, appeals court overreach, anything but the obvious. That the case themselves, or the cases, I should say, were bad, that they were inefficient, that they were not substantial. that the indictments were shaky, that the stories never lined up with the charges, that the facts adduced at trial never had anything to do with what he was charged with. So that's the part that no one wants to admit. That we built our cultural movements, our hashtags, our Emmy speeches, our puffed up righteous moments on legal cases that couldn't survive actual scrutiny. And that is not just embarrassing, it's dangerous. Because when real victims come forward, and when real victims come forward next time, when somebody actually does have the receipts, the evidence, the timeline, the facts that pertain to that which was charged, the public's going to shrug. See, the press won't care. The prosecutors will flinch. Why? Because everyone remembers the last time when the system burned all its capital trying to convict someone, not because of the facts being airtight, but because it felt like the right narrative, or the facts were sexual or tawdry in nature, and that must necessarily be connected to some kind of conviction. The Weinstein case could have been handled with surgical precision. A proper DA would have kept the case lean and clean and clear and legally sound. Instead, they packed it with every grievance and trauma they could find, hoping that the sheer weight of the allegations would somehow collapse the defense and destroy him. That's not prosecution, that's performance art, and bad at that. That's prosecutorial nihilism. And Diddy, whatever happened to letting an investigation breathe? Whatever happened? Whatever happened to not litigating the entire case through TMZ and anonymous sources and pretrial PR blitzes? Why be guilty of something? Why be guilty of something the old-fashioned way if you can do it in or on the platforms of social media? He may be guilty of one of the charges, but you wouldn't know it because the media, and frankly certain legal teams, turned the process into a sewer of salacious garbage and one-liners. Look, the problem isn't just that these prosecutions fail. It's that they were designed to fail, destined to fail. They were never designed for the courtroom. They were designed for headlines and documentaries and Harvey Weinstein and that sort of thing. This is now the new courtroom here. A YouTube thumbnail, a clickbait tweet, a leaked text, a viral TikTok clip. This is the courtroom, and it's horrible. Actual rules of evidence, outdated. Jury instructions, who cares? Who needs them? But the public must be addressed. And when the public wants blood, prosecutors oblige. But it never ends well. Because you can't rig the jury system, the legal system, like a trending topic that pushes back. And history, my friend, will show that these cases, Weinstein's and Diddy's and others now swirling around in some similar orbit, they weren't the triumphs that you thought they would be or that they sold them to be. They were failures, incompetent, rushed, overreaching spectacles, so replete with unfairness, a destruction, a complete abandonment, an abnegation, dare I say, of due process. And the system itself of restoring faith ended up cheapening it. Because when you confuse justice with theater, when you trade precision for outrage and due process for drama, you don't risk just losing, you guarantee it. And worst of all, you make it that much harder for the next case, the next victim, the next DA, who actually wants to do it right, who actually has a case that's worthy of our attention. That's the tragedy here. That's what we're talking about. We didn't just botch prosecutions, or rather they should. They polluted the system. We poisoned the well. And now we pretend that we don't understand why it all fell apart. But we don't really care as long as we get to hear the dirt. The dirt. Who did what? The scabrous, the salacious, the concupiscent. That's what it's about. What do you think, my friend? Like this video. Subscribe to the channel. And tell me, what do you think? What do you think? Comment as you see fit.